So today I'm going to be hanging acoustic panels on the ceiling of the shop. Now sound for me as someone who produces videos is pretty important. And I've talked to people, and depending on how they listen to the show or watch the show, they may not even notice if there's some echo, but if you use headphones, any kind of quality headphones or even earbuds, you could probably hear the difference between an echoey space and one that's a little bit well suited for video work like this. So it's really important for me to install acoustic panels to absorb some of those sound waves and deaden them to make it a little bit more of a studio environment. And even as a shop, it's much more comfortable to hold conversations and just to be in that space if all the tool sounds aren't reverberating and bouncing off of the walls, creating this sort of echo chamber effect. So it might be something you want to consider even if you don't do videos in your shop. All right, so what I have here is an acoustic panel. Now this is actually something you could probably make yourself, just using some maybe 1x2 furring strips to make a border. Put a, I think they even sell this stuff at the big box stores. You could buy these insulation panels basically, but they make them specifically for sound dampening. Put that in the middle, put a plywood backer on the back, and then cut a little chamfer around the outside and stretch an acoustically transparent material over the top. Unfortunately, I don't have enough time to make these. I mean, that's what it comes down to for me. Time is money. So if I look at something like this and I say, well, this is 55 bucks a pop, how long would it take me to do each one of these? Sometimes I'll side on just making the purchase, and that's what I did. So these are about, I think, $54.95 when I bought them, and I got a whole box. So I'm gonna kind of sporadically place them on the ceiling just to help deaden the sound and kill some of that echo. All right, so I'm gonna show you how I hang them. It may not be the most elegant thing, the most beautiful thing to watch, but like most of the stuff that goes on here, you know, when it comes to doing the shop, you do what you have to do to get the job done. All right, let's get to it. Now the product comes with a paper template, and it shows you where to mount the clips in the panel and where to mount them on your wall. All right, but paper is going to be a little bit tricky to work with on the ceiling. So what I wound up doing was making a cardboard version of this simply by cutting a 2x4 piece of cardboard, putting the template on top and poking through with a pencil, and then just making sure my holes are labeled panel and wall, and then I can actually transfer these marks directly to the ceiling and to the panel. Now the clips that they've provided are these Z clips, and these are essentially like aluminum French cleats. They interlock, they have a very low profile, so it doesn't cause it to hang off the wall too far, and they're actually really, really strong. Now the problem is, these are not intended for use on a ceiling. Now, I feel like the safety disclaimers here are getting to be a little bit of a habit on this new shop update series, but you know, I tried a couple different types of hardware to hang these things from the ceiling, including some picture hanging hardware, which would be screwed to the back of the panel and a couple of hooks to hold it on there. Now, trying to get 4 of these in alignment so they all slide on at the same time was nearly impossible. So I canned that idea and just went back to the Z clips. If each one of these Z clips, and you have 4 total per panel, if each one of those is held on there, it's gonna take a lot for this thing to want to come off. They are, just with friction alone, held in place. Now, I know the manufacturer says just for wall use only, but I don't really see it being a major problem. And it's not like we're necessarily in an earthquake zone or anything like that. Now, worst case scenario, if I feel like it is gonna move, I could just get a dab of silicone caulk or something on each side, just to kind of have a little extra something that stops it from sliding in any particular direction. But I don't even think I'm necessarily gonna need that. So let's get to the installation. First, I use a laser level wherever possible to help keep my panels aligned on the ceiling. With the cardboard template on the ceiling, I make a few light pencil marks in the appropriate holes. Now the chances of getting a rafter are pretty slim here, so I'll be using drywall anchors, specifically Easy Anchor brand, since they go in with no pre-drilling, just point and shoot. Now it's a simple matter to drive the screws for the Z-clip. Of course, we have 4 of these to install per panel, which can quickly become tedious. With the template on the back of the panel, I can place my marks on the plywood backer. All 4 clips are installed with the supplied screws. Now you do need to be careful since you're doing this on a ladder, but installing the panel is actually pretty easy. Though later I did have 1 or 2 panels that were slightly twisted, which did make getting all 4 clips to engage a little bit more problematic. Well, I am now covered in fuzz, but I got all 12 panels installed on the ceiling. Now, I could only afford 12 at this point, so I focused all of my efforts on the area where I talk the most. I record wood talk over here, and I'll probably be addressing the camera either at my workbench or at the assembly table here for all of my videos. The rest of the shop, usually it's going to be action shots. I'm not going to do a whole lot of talking over there, so if it's not perfect, that's fine. But ultimately, if you're really trying to get good acoustic treatment in a space, you really need to treat the whole space, right? And you probably could go and do some calculations to figure out what percentage of that ceiling space would need to be covered to get the desired effect. But ultimately, just adding something tends to help quite a bit. And I can hear the difference in my audio just talking. Sometimes I'll clap my hands, which I'm not going to do right now because that'd be super annoying. But I clap my hands and listen for how much echo, and it's definitely a lot more deadened since the previous setup. So I did get some questions when I posted a picture of one of my panels online, and that's pretty awesome because now I can talk about some of those things and hopefully head off the questions that you might have. Now, the most common question I received was, how well do these panels work for soundproofing? Let's say you've got a garage shop like I do, or a basement shop, and you want to woodwork early in the morning or late at night and you don't want to disturb your family. The problem is, these aren't going to do anything, right? These are acoustic treatments. They're essentially improving the sound quality within the space, but they do absolutely nothing to prevent that sound from traveling through the walls and into adjacent spaces. So there's a big difference between soundproofing or sound isolation and acoustical treatments. Okay, so if you want to soundproof a space, think in terms of building a room within a room. You need airspace, and there's a whole science behind this to how you can separate a space from the adjoining spaces. So you have to stop vibrations from traveling through, so let's say you just have drywall 2x4 and then another layer of drywall on the other side. Well, vibrations and sound just travel right through that. But if you have an air gap and maybe little rubber grommet dealy things, right, to separate the space and actually create that room within a room, now that sound isn't necessarily going to travel through. And this is, like I said, it's a whole science. There's all kinds of research you can do if you're really trying to soundproof your space, but it is a lot more work than what we did here. My only goal here was to kill reverberations. So sound kind of bounces off of stuff, right? You don't just hear what's coming directly from my mouth, you'll hear it bouncing off the wall and the ceiling. So my goal is to just break that up a little bit and use soft materials on the ceiling to help absorb some of that sound and hopefully result in a higher quality audio for the videos. And also generally a more pleasant space to have a conversation in or even to work because the tool noise isn't now bouncing off the walls quite as much. A few other folks expressed concern about the fact that these things are covered in cloth, just because dust might settle and start to cake on the surface. So, I guess every shop is a little bit different. I can only speak from my experience, but generally speaking, in my shop, while the ceiling does get dust, everything in the shop does get a little bit of dust on it, it's not going to get tons of dust because dust settles, right? And I also make a pretty good effort to clean the dust and keep it out of the air in the first place with my cyclone and my air cleaner. So I guess if you don't use anything to collect dust, maybe that could be a problem. I don't even know how much that would impact how well these things work if they got a little bit of dust on them. So this is, to me, as far as I'm concerned, zero maintenance. I should never have to touch them again unless I want to change something. A few other folks brought up the concern that these panels are surface mounted and there's no space between the panel and the ceiling. This is, again, something where if you really understand sound engineering, this is a thing you have to have a background in to get, and I don't, right? But the little bit of research that I did explained that a lot of times when you put that air gap there, that is to help really trap some of the low-end frequencies. And I don't really have much to worry about with low-end stuff. I'm focused kind of on mids and highs here. Not to mention, the manufacturer provides Z-clips. So if you're mounting this, they actually expect you to put it right up against the wall. So not that you can always count on a manufacturer to give you the best case scenario. I mean, look at the world of finishing, right? They sometimes give you some wacky advice. But I figured for my purposes, it would be fine. Especially since in my last shop, I did the same thing with foam sound absorption pads, and I put them surface mounted, and it worked like a charm, right? And I could tell that these are working pretty well too. So just keep that in mind. If you do this, do your research. You may be happier if you just get a little length of chain and kind of just suspend it from the ceiling by a couple of inches, and it could very well improve things. In here, for now, I'm happy. Maybe in the future I'll change it if I feel like I need to. Oh, and by the way, I thought you might be interested in seeing this. I had some leftover foam material. This is what I installed in the old shop. The problem is these have gone up in price significantly by about $50 a panel, and the company that I ordered from last time has a minimum order quantity that is way more than I need. It was going to cost me like $5,000 to get the panels that I needed, so I was like, no thank you. Even though I did like working with this stuff and they're very easy to hang on the ceiling, it just wasn't happening for me. So I'll probably cut these up into smaller pieces and use them in strategic places to kind of help with the Wood Talk podcasting stuff. So that really just about does it. And you know, honestly, if you're not into the whole sound thing, if you're not recording videos, this probably might not be very useful to you. But if you spend a lot of time in your shop, echoey spaces are annoying. I don't really like spending much time in spaces that are too echoey. So it might be something for you to look into if you spend a lot of time there, have conversations and phone calls. It just makes it a more pleasant environment to be in. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Until the next update.